Folks, as you're joining us, we'd love to see where you're tuning in from in the chat. If you want to say hi, let's give everybody a moment to sign in before we get started. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Preview Week for Willamette, the Pinot Noir auction. The 2019 Willamette Valley wines featured in this tasting series are exclusive small lot bottlings for our wine trade auction. If you don't know about the auction and you'd like to learn more about how to purchase these wines, you can contact Emily at the WVWA, and I put her email address in the chat. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our auction sponsors for their ongoing support. And a big special thank you to our Imperial sponsor, Winebow. And now I'd like to introduce today's panelists. Representing lot number 33, Nate Klostermann of Argyle. Representing lot number 34, Tahmiene Momtazi of Maysara.
Good morning.
Representing lot number 36, Stewart Boedecker of Boedecker Cellars.
Morning.
Representing lot number 37, John Pataccoli of Redhawk.
Morning.
Representing lot number 38, Bryan Weil of Alexana. And now I'll kick it off to our moderator, John Gabelhausen of Alexana. John, take it away.
Thank you, Julia. Welcome, everybody. We've got a very exciting virtual for you this morning. This is this is our 6th year, believe it or not, doing the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir barrel auction. So we're really promoting exceptional Oregon Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays. We have a fantastic group of winemakers today. I'm really excited to jump into this. So how we're going to do this is each one of the winemakers is going to kind of talk about their auction lot, and then we're going to throw them some zingers and ask them some really fun questions. So we're going to start with Nate from Argyle Winery, one of the older wineries. I think Argyle was founded in 1987 with the belief that cool climate Oregon was ideal for producing sparkling as well as some amazing Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays. Nate, you take it away. Let's hear about your auction lot and a little bit about you and how you got started with Argyle. I believe you're from Wisconsin, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's a good day in the Wisconsin neighborhoods these days. Aaron Rodgers reported to camp yesterday, so.
Oh, seriously.
But yeah, no, yeah, you were right. We started in 1987. Argyle started in '87 to make sparkling wine, and we didn't make red wine until the early '90s. So the whole project was based on sparkling to start with, and then we did a little Chardonnay, a little Riesling as well. And so as we kind of developed vineyards and viticulture to consistently make Pinot year in and year out, that's when we decided to start making Pinot to go with the bubbles. So I started in 2005. I came out from the Midwest as a harvest intern with Argyle. So I didn't know what to expect. I knew I wanted to move west and jump in and see what was happening in the wine scene, and I fell in love with it. Fell into a really good spot to learn from Roland, who started the place, and just kind of started training in the cellar and in the lab, and slowly over time tasting with him, and kind of figured out how how to make a little bit of wine. So it's been 15, 16 years now. So it's kind of crazy. I took over from him fully in 2013 when he stepped back just to focus on Rocco, and he'll be showing his Rocco wines at this auction as well, which I'm sure will be delicious.
I'm sure you have some amazing stories of your time you spent with him, huh? We'll save that for later, maybe offline.
Yeah, he's the storyteller of the two of us. He's got some good ones. I'll have to jog my memory, but yeah, there's always good ones. And so we have 3 vineyards that we farm. Knutson Vineyard in the Dundee Hills, so that's owned by the Knutson family, but still a big portion of our program. And then we've got Lone Star Vineyard in the Eola-Amby Hills. That's a lower elevation site, mainly for still wines. And then our third site is called Spirit Hill Vineyard, which is also in the Eola-Amby Hills, and that's a high elevation site. And so, we've got these 3 vineyards to work with, so it's kind of been hard to choose which site to choose for this auction wine over the last number of years. And so we've dabbled with all 3 of the vineyards. And for me, the most exciting vineyard for me for this wine for the last couple of years we've been making this wine from is Spirit Hill Vineyard. So it's our youngest site, but it's also our most exposed and kind of raw, windy, rocky, volcanic soils. So the wines from here have a lot of energy and tension and minerality. So it's at about 700 to 800 feet is the elevation up there. Very windy. It's at the top of the hill. It's an old Christmas tree farm, and so we're still learning all about it. But the blocks that we've isolated for this for the auction wine this year actually comes from a single block of Pommard. It was the first planting of Pinot that we did there in 2009. And we've got it's a big vineyard. It's 180 acres, and so we've got a lot of blocks to play with between sparkling wine, still wine. And so over the years, this particular block has become my favorite year in and year out for red wine. And so we isolate just this block of Pommard, and we taste through all the barrels. And we do different iterations. We do destemmed versions of this block. We do another one with about 15% whole cluster, and then we do another one at 100% whole cluster. And for me, the ones that for the last 2 years that have jumped out have been the 100% whole clusters in combination with a new barrel. And so I think it's the 100% whole cluster brings a real floral and almost delicacy to this kind of raw and energetic wine. So I love that interplay of the whole cluster with this wine, and the new wood really brings a complete package for a wine that I think is going to be really ageable and really exciting to drink for years to come.
Great. So that's lot number 33. It's a 5K lot. You got to tell me about the name, man. Soul Searching, right?
Soul Searching. So this plays into the name of the vineyard. We call it Spirit Hill. There's an old pioneer cemetery on the site it's kind of tucked into the woods that wasn't even on the register when we first purchased the land. And so we stumbled into this old cemetery. So that's where the Spirit Hill name comes from. And that's kind of playing off of that with, we've got our line of Spirit House wines, and we've got a lot of ghost nomenclature in our background. And so we wanted to kind of play off of the ghost theme from this site. So it's, it was overgrown and a bunch of, weeds and everything. And so we've cleaned it up and preserve it. And so kind of our scary little, spooky little thing in the woods.
Cool.
Take some folks up to and taste up there. And I like the history of it to the area of the Eola Hills.
Great. Thanks, Nate. We're expecting a Halloween party with some bubbles up there in October. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks. That's fantastic. We're going to move on to lot number 34. This is really exciting. This by Maysara. So Tahmiene, why don't you tell us a little bit about your auction lot? It's a 5-case lot. Let's start with the name of the lot, because that's really interesting. Tell me about that.
So it's Baz, and Baz is an ancient Persian word meaning to celebration. So to consume wine and food, enjoy music and dance. And we named it because of we dedicated this for the Willamette Valley auction, thinking that it brings everyone together and there's great, music and bringing people to come to celebrate the Willamette Valley. So that's where the name came from. And actually, on our estate, we have 30 blocks, and I picked 10 blocks for this lot. And I just bottled it on Thursday. It was a fun time. But it's Pomard, and there is clones of 113, 114, 115, 667, 777. It was 20 months in barrel. And what we did was, it's all single ferments. Before we started the fermentation, we grabbed the yeast from the vineyard, left it in the vineyard, and then brought it in with the fruit. And so it's all native yeast. Everything was just the way that we thought was what we like to do at Maysara, because we're a certified biodynamic winery, meaning our vineyard certified. And our estate is actually about 502 acres, and there's 260 acres planted mainly in noir with some Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, as well as Riesling. And Maysara means house of wine. So we try to bring our heritage back into each bottle of these wines.
And you guys started in 1997, is that right?
The vineyard was purchased in 97 and 1998. Where the first planting was done, and it was 13 acres. But Maysara was founded in 2000.
Got it. All right. Well, that's exciting. Can't wait to get your wine out there. Very exciting. I'd love going down and visiting you at your winery and tasting through those barrels. When you have that much land, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how you choose this one particular lot, because that's a lot, right? To look at and taste.
Yes, it takes me about a good, maybe I would say 3 weeks. 2 weeks to taste, and then about a week to do blending trials, just to make sure we're doing it right. So sometimes I think I was like, oh, my job is easy. But then I think about if I had other vineyards, oh my God, it'd be much harder for me, because I would love everything.
Did your dad stay involved with those tastings?
No, majority of the tastings are done by me. And then we have a group tasting when I make the final blends, if they like it. And if they don't, they'll turn around and they'll blunt with the whole team and say, you have to go back to the cellar. So
Yeah.
they're, I mean, at least I've been since the winemaker since 2007. I mean, I think I've been told one time to go back in the cellar to reblend, but that was in 2007. But he hasn't told me to go back. He's like, oh, this is good. I like it. I'm happy with it.
Tell us a little bit about the nuances of the wine you chose.
So, as I said, I just bottled it. So before, I actually went back and to look what I tasted before bottling. So I got a lot of cherry, plum, a lot of pomegranate paste, which a hint of nutmeg and baking spice. And then the background had like a white pepper. The finish is really, really beautiful. I mean, I did open this bottle up yesterday to see, and I was like, oh, it's really in bottle shock, but it's really, really pretty. We opened it up again this morning. I was like, oh, it's opening up. So it's definitely getting it's changing now. Like the plum is like Italian plum. I'm like, it's really, 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 really opening up. So I highly recommend, if you do purchase it, hold off for a couple months, just bottled.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Tahmiene. Moving on to Boedecker, lot number 36, a 10-case lot by Stewart and Athena. You guys began as a 400-case winery in Carlton and then in Northeast Portland in 2008. Is that correct?
Yeah, my first vintage in the Willamette Valley was actually back in 1996. So this
Wow.
it's like 25 years ago. It makes me feel ancient. Working just as like a punch down monkey. Doing the harvest intern thing, and then kept coming back. And then in 2003, my wife, Athena Pappas, and I decided we wanted to do this together. So we started out at the winemaker studio in Carlton, tiny that year, 400 cases. Slowly grew the winery year after year. And then in 2008, when we finally got big enough to move out on our own, we've been living a dual purpose life out in the valley and in Portland, where we have our house. And we decided to move the winery into town, and it's only 45 minutes away from the vineyards. So we're, stone's throw away. There's a bunch of winemakers who live in our neighborhood who just do the commute every day. And for us, it's great to get rid of that 1 hour drive every morning and every afternoon. But yeah, we got into this because we love the winemaking side of it. We've been working with vineyard partners over the years since 2003. The vineyard that our auction wine comes from is a vineyard called Hershey Vineyard. And it's in Yamhill, Carlton, AVA. It's smack between the two towns of Yamhill and Carlton. For those of you who have flown out to visit, as you drive down Highway 47, there's a sign for a cemetery that points off to the east. Their vineyard is right up at the top of that little road. It's a fantastic site. A friend of ours, John Hershey, planted it back in 2007. So it's not a young site anymore, but it's a fairly young site. The auction lot comes from a block of 667 clone Pinot Noir that's always been beautiful. It's this great balance of dark, plummy blackberry fruit that you can get from 667 in Yamhill, Carlton. But it has this nuance to it where it's not just big, heavy, sweet fruit. It's got a little bit of lift behind it, some nice spice notes that come in. And we've always fermented this block with about 30% whole cluster, again, to kind of accentuate those spice notes that come through and balance out the sweet black fruit. It's a stunner. It is really great. The name for this wine, John, we called this, and my wife is sitting next to me, and she's going to make fun of my Greek pronunciation.
When I read agape, I thought all I could think of was that type of glass that we use for wine bottles. It was an agape, but I'm like, that's not it. That's for sure not it.
Yes, so it's Greek and it translates as my love. Because again, we got into this business ourselves. We don't have partners. This is all our gig. We've grown it slowly on our own because this is what we love to do, and it gives us a chance to build a business together and work together side by side, which. For those of you married people who work side by side knows that it's generally awesome and then sometimes challenging.
Yeah.
But yeah, the wine is just stunning. It's I hadn't actually opened it since we bottled it until a couple of weeks ago, and we tasted through it, and it's plush and dark, lots of dark berry fruit, a little bit of plum on the finish, married with some nice oak tones that kind of carry this nice baking spice note through this super long finish. It's truly great. Makes me wonder what I did with it. We actually haven't finished doing the rest of the blending for the 19s, and I'm going to go find the rest of the lots from this block and do something special with them.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, Stewart. We're going to move on to Redhawk Vineyards and Winery, lot number 37, a study of Pommard. It's a 5-case lot. John,
Thanks,
go for
John.
it. Let's hear about your kind of your brand and your wine here.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My wife and I bought Redhawk in the summer of 2005. So we've been at it 16 years or so. However, the original 5-acre vineyard on the property was planted in 78. Own rooted, we still have those vines, but the whole property is 15 acres planted now. We work with several other growers, obviously. When we bought the property, they were doing about 1,200 cases. We do about 6,000 to 7,000 now. So we've grown it, but we're still very small. This particular lot, we single vineyard these two vineyards. So I bought that old vine I described that was planted in 78. We call it the Pataccoli family vineyard. It's a very small, there's only a couple acres left of that. And we bottle that as the Pataccoli family vineyard. And then for the auction, and I think this is the 4th or 5th year in a row that I've done this blend for the auction, I blend it with some Pommard from Zenith Vineyard that was planted in 98, and that's on rootstock. Mine is planted in 78 and is own rooted, which kind of gives you a little history of the valley over that 20 years by late 90s, nobody planted own rooted anymore, but in the 70s, practically everybody planted own rooted plants. So anyway, these are 2 single bottlings. We don't blend them. Only for this wine, only in 5 cases. This year, I think I did 54% of the Pataccoli, 46% of the Zenith Vineyard. The study in Pommard, you guys forced me to put a name on this. I wanted to try to add some drama because it's Pommard from 2 different places on different rootstocks, but that's all. That's the reason for the name. But the wine itself, I think it's just classic old vine Pommard, especially from here in the Yosemite Hills. So it shows real dark cherry and a little bit of plum. I put 30% brand new oak on both of these lots. So basically it's about not quite a third brand new oak. So we have a little bit of oak notes on the wine, but very much in the background. And it will tend as it gets older. I tasted through last week my personal stash of the last 4 or 5 vintages of this auction wine. This blend ages really well. I can say at least for the last 4 or 5 years that the older vine Pommard tends to taste more open, show more notes, really more fruit notes 3-4 years out than they do today. I mean, it's just generally the truth on these 2 wines when I individually bottle. So this is truly unique. You can't get it anywhere else. I don't make any extra of this except for a little bit for myself, which I think we all do. And I just want to comment on this vintage a little bit. And we haven't really touched on this. Coming off of 18, big drought stress vintage, no rain, most all of it. Just a really nice vintage, I think we would all say. And then we get to 19, and of course, we all know in September it started to rain, and it was just a whole different story, this vintage, than the 2018s. But I honestly think that this vintage may very well show better 10 years from now than the 18s. Lower alcohols, a little more elegant wines, which I think later on, they're not going to be hot like some vintages can get.
Sure.
So
I'm really excited about this wine and this vintage.
Great. I'm already thirsty thinking about it. Thank you. Moving on to Alexana Winery, lot number 38, Sticks and Stones, a 5-case lot by Bryan Weil. Bryan, take it away, buddy. Maybe he's in the cellar right now. There he is.
Okay. No, I was trying to log out so you could just take it away. No? Okay. Well, my internet is unstable, but I'm in the room next to you, so we'll see how this goes. But thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you, John. Better not screw this up with my boss as the moderator, so we'll keep it short and sweet. But we're here at Alexana, Dundee Hills. This is a property of Dr. Madaya Ravana. He's actually a Houston-based cardiologist. Just loves wine, so he has 3 wineries: Napa Valley, his Ravana Vineyards, and Argentina. We have Corazon del Sol that John and I have built and been a big part of. And then we were also here in the beginning of this building here at Alexana, which is kind of the big sister. We're here with 55 acres. This will be my 11th vintage here, and John's got me by about 3 months. So we've been here for over a decade, and just been really fun to watch this kind of grow up and plant more. We just actually purchased a property next door and are adding an additional 42 acres of vines yet last year, and this year we planted. So about 97 total here in the next few years, which is exciting. Will be mostly estate, but we do get a little bit of offsite fruit. But for the auction lot today, we focused on the estate. I really got a great facility here and a great vineyard to work with. It's a really diverse vineyard too. So kind of like T over there, it's really hard to pick and choose what to play with every year from the 31 blocks of grapes that we actually have, because there's so many options. And within those blocks, sometimes we may have 2 or 3 fermenters. So we end up with about 100 different lots of Pinot Noir all said and done at the end of the year, because everything's kept in small fermenters here, about 2 and 3 ton fermenters. And then obviously dispersed into different barrels from those fermenters. So lots of options. And so it's fun to play with the team. We just bottled our first round of 2020s just recently, but this was bottled actually about a year ago in September. And so this one is called Sticks and Stones, because this vineyard is really diverse, with the sense that typically in Dundee Hills, you're going to see a lot of the volcanic soils. And, on the front side, what I call it, it's almost all Jory soil. We're kind of more on the back side towards the Yamhill Carlton area, Ribbon Ridge, Chehalis Mountain side of it. And so there's maybe slightly less plantable acreage just because of some of the slopes and the aspects that are back here. But Dr. Ivana found this beautiful property back in 2005 that is kind of undulated in a million different directions, and actually has two pretty main soil types of the volcanics and sedimentaries, and broken down from that, almost 18 different subclasses of those. So it's a really diverse site, and it goes between about 300 and 600 foot elevation. But the original plantings were actually a couple of years before Dr. Ivana bought the property in 2003. And that's going to be right behind me in some of the volcanic section. And it's more kind of like less weathered volcanic than Jory. So Jory is going to be really smooth and almost consistent across the entire look of the soil, versus Nikaya and some of the less weathered volcanic soils are going to have a lot more parent material. So that's kind of where the pun and the name comes from, sticks and stones. So we pulled for this bottling from some of our more kind of rocky soils in the volcanic section. And we pull them from the east side of our vineyard that's a bit higher elevation in some of the older vines. And kind of like tea as well, we actually blended a few different blocks. So I think we have 6 different clones this year that we put into it. And my team just painstakingly pulls a few gallons out of each barrel because we want to blend it with a little bit of new oak. So it ends up being about 30% new oak that's been aged for about 11 months. And we bottle that up. But it's a really great spot in the vineyard, especially in a vintage like 2019, which is what I would consider back to more kind of classic Oregon with moderate alcohols, great acidity, really lovely flavors, because it was fairly warm, but really kind of cooled down in that September period. And yeah, we had some rain, but we know how to deal with that and pick in between it and do viticultural kind of passes that we know to help with that. But yeah, really interesting spot in the vineyard. It's a little bit cooler even than the rest of the vineyard. So in a 2019 vintage, that's already kind of cool. It kind of accentuates that. So, but I love it. It creates these elegant, age-worthy wines. So that's where we kind of picked it. It gets a little bit of shade. I wouldn't call it even shade, but it gets less of the afternoon heat when the sun's set in the west. And so creates for some beautifully delicate wines that should age for a long time. I just opened this last night before I left, and it's really opening up and singing. And a lot of, I'd call more primary kind of cherries and berries. And then moving into a little bit more spice notes. It's 100% to stem, so it's just pretty focused on the fruit and the soil and the different clones that we have on that side of the property.
Great, thanks, Brian. Well, all amazing lots. I wanted to recognize for a second, on July 16th, the Willamette Valley received formal recognition and protection by the European Union through Protected Geographical Indication, which is PGI status approval. Listen, this is a major breakthrough in global brand awareness and a milestone for the Valley's many hardworking winemakers and growers. The PGI system protects iconic names of agricultural products, spirits and drinks, wines, with a link to their geographical origin, including well-known producers such as Champagne and Barolo. There's only 2 American wine regions, Napa Valley and now Willamette Valley, that carry this distinction. So we're really, really proud of the Willamette Valley and how far we've come. With that being said, the Willamette Valley is fairly large. It's 3.5 million acres. At its widest point is about 60 miles, and it's 150 miles long. There's a lot of diversity within the region and in all these different AVAs that we're working with. Brian kind of touched on it. I know John did. Why don't we just talk a little more about the 2019 vintage as a whole? Maybe if you could all kind of highlight some of the exciting things and some of the challenges. We all know it was definitely a cooler year. For me, I personally like those cooler years, like 2007, 2013. When they first come on, you're not quite sure what's going to happen. But these vintages are marathon runners, not sprinters, right? They're going to be able to carry in your cellar for years and years to come. So why don't we start with you, Nate? Can you kind of talk about your experiences in 2019?
Yeah, I love the vintage for that. Yeah, that cool down in September. Just really kind of put the brakes on everything. prevented things from going in that direction of 18 or 16 with that really not over ripeness, but really lush vintage. So I like this old school kind of pristine style. The thing I remember most, there was lots of rains, but they were very sporadic and isolated. And so, the winery here is in Newburgh, and I would be driving home at night to Carlton, and I remember going through Dundee one afternoon, and it was just a torrential downpour, and the streets were flooding. And then I called up our vineyard guy who was down in Neola. He's like, I was concerned about it. It's sunny and beautiful down here. And then same thing, a couple days later, I got home to Carlton, and another torrential rain in Carlton, and then Dundee Hills were totally fine. So it was very,
it's like little pockets.
It wasn't
around the valley.
yeah, it wasn't a blanket rain. It was very, very sporadic and isolating. And so everybody's vineyards were slightly affected differently. But yeah, I love the elegance of the vintage for sure.
People sometimes say it only rains one time a year in Oregon. Starts on Halloween and ends at the 4th of July, but that's not necessarily true anymore. We see as the years go on that the climate is definitely changing, and the amount of rainfall and when it comes is quite a bit different. T, why don't you kind of tell us about your 2019 experience?
Actually, I was trying to go back to reading my notes about 2019 on my phone, and I was trying to remember, and I was like, I just remember picking around September, I want to say 22nd. I don't know why in my head the 22nd it pops in my head, but I just do remember it was a very nice vintage, because I do pick a little bit earlier than my AVA, just because I have such a large vineyard and I need to bring in fruit, and I have to go through about 3 to 4 stages, meaning I have to flip my tanks. So it's always a good thing for me to pick a little bit early, because I can use that for the acidity level, and then the fruit that comes later, it's more for my body. So I just remember also I was bottling at the same time during harvest too. So
that's fun.
Yeah.
That is so much fun, right?
Yeah.
And especially on a vintage like this, because I would imagine the sorting table had a lot of people around it. So do you put them on the bottling line or the sorting table, right?
Yeah, I had 2 crews technically. But it was more of the beginning of harvest, and then we're learning the kinks of how to work the machines with them. And then we're bottling, and I'm have to be down on the floor just to make sure there's nothing going wrong down there. So it was fun times. But I do remember that rain, actually, I felt like it saved me a little bit. So it slowed me down of what fruit was coming in, because I didn't, as we said, in 2018, the fruit was lush and big. And this, I thought 19s were just so romantic in a true Pinot way. I love what Pinot resembles. It's supposed to be a light body. It's not supposed to be a big body wine. It's fragile, and I think it's always, to me, a very seductive when tasting it and making it. So 19 vintage for me was a really good vintage, because I got to do everything, bottle and harvest, and have all the timing to bring in the fruit. So I would say the rain helped me here at my estate, but I didn't have that much. And then we're in the Van Duzer corridor. So that when we actually have low disease pressure, so we didn't have a lot of issues about botrytis or anything like that. So all the fruit came in really, really clean.
That's great. I get to taste a lot with Bryan, and definitely that cooler, damper conditions in the beginning of the year, long range of picking times is definitely, really approachable, bright acidity. I think the 2019s, I know they're going to have a really long aging potential, really aromatic dried flowers. I personally think it's more of a classic Oregon vintage than some of these previous years that were so hot and so dry. I'm really excited about the potential of the 2019s. Stewart, why don't you talk about your experiences with 2019?
Yeah, I'll echo everybody else. I think we'd gone through this string of really hot, dry vintages starting in 2014, and it was awesome to be picking in late September, early October for the first time in years. and the sporadic bits of the rain, it was interesting. It was one of those years where it was great to get that little bit of rain interspersed, because it actually helped refresh the vines, and you could actually see the flavor ripening accelerate past the rains, as the vines got this little bit of from that summer heat from August, and the cooler nighttime temps did help keep that brighter acid in the wines, which is kind of why we all make wine in Oregon. We're not down in Sonoma for a reason. We like this fresh acidity and these cool fall nights. We'll see what this year's like. This year, I think we're probably going to be picking early in September, but we'll see. You never know.
Yeah, it's been pretty warm. We've been kind of praying for a good old-fashioned Oregon car wash here. Hopefully next week we'll get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, the great thing about those rains too is we always work with a decent amount of stems and whole cluster, and we really got much better full magnification of all the stems. When the fruit came in, you got much more of the spice notes without having to worry about over extracting some of the greener notes from, like, you get in some of those hotter years where the sugar all comes on at once and you pick the grapes and you're making decisions about clusters or no clusters by kind of crunching on the stem. You usually dump 50% whole cluster and you're de-stemming the whole lot just because the fruit got ripe, but the plants really weren't physiologically mature. And 19 was one of those vintages where the plants were really physiologically just there at the same time as the sugars and the acids were. It was great. I would take that weather every year, any year.
Great, John. I know you talked a little bit about the 2019 vintage for you. Is there anything you'd like to add to what you had already discussed?
No, yeah, I want to echo obviously what everybody's saying. I think it's much more of a classic Oregon Pinot Noir vintage. Going back, I think about 13, because even though we got a deluge of rain everywhere over about 4 days in 13, this was much more spread out, and as Nate alluded to, was more spread out geographically as well. It wasn't quite the same, but it reminds me a little bit of the 13s. And I would also add, for my own property, we're 100% dry farm. So some of these summers, getting a little rain in September is not really all that bad for my fruit and for my vines. They kind of could use a little drink that late in the growing season. So I'm real optimistic about the 19s going forward.
Yeah, you made a good point, kind of taking it back to that 2013 vintage. I don't know, people listening right now, if they've had a chance to crack open some of those 13s, they are beautiful right now. They're singing.
They are.
Yeah, they're absolutely stunning. Even some of the 07s we've been pulling out of the cellar and trying, which everyone knows that was a really cold and wet year. Those wines are beautiful, beautiful. Bryan, you want to touch on 2019 for you at Alexana?
I mean, it's pretty easy going last. Everything's been said, but for our specific site, we aren't in the corridors, maybe like the old Amity and McMinnville have a bit more wind and just quicker and higher, but we are pretty exposed up here to the Coast Range. We just stare out over the Coast Range in the back of the winery here. We can see out, and it really comes in and dries the fruit out very quickly. So like I think you heard, there were pockets of rain, and there was a substantial amount of rains at time, but we're really able to dry it out, and the winds pick up pretty early here. And we have all the equipment in the winery with vibrating tables and slotted picking bins and everything to deal with it. So to me, picking in the rain, even as long as you can get the tractors in, is not an issue. Really, it's about the pockets. So I remember this vintage being, kind of big chunks of picks. And so for this particular bottle, it looked like it was September 11th, October 2nd. So pretty typical what we would probably see here on the estate, mid-September to early October for the volcanic section of the vineyard. And once again, like T, I was actually bottling 2 days after we started harvest. So we have a 3-level gravity flow winery here. So I do remember the vintages where I'm just starting to crank on harvest. And of course I have a second team downstairs, bottling 3,000 cases, and it's a lot of work, but can be done here because we kind of have it separated between the 3 levels. So I just remember it being kind of not a really fast and furious harvest, but definitely a pretty big chunks throughout harvest where we were processing a lot more in a day than we typically would just to get it in. And I think we did a great job, and I love the vintage.
Great. Yeah, and we've kind of touched on these cooler vintages and ageability. I want to throw this out to all of you winemakers. So between acidity, tannin, alcohol, ripeness, what's the MVP for ageability? We've talked about this. That's, I talked to a lot of winemakers, and they all have different ideas of what carries that wine through for, years and years to come.
I've been going last forever, so I'm going first.
Let's hear it, Bryan.
pH to me is pretty important. So I think acidity for long-term aging, for stability if they're in anthocyanins and then, phenolics, the tannins. So I think they all play a part for sure, and lower alcohols and all that typically come with a vintage that's cooler. But typically in cooler vintages, you have higher acidity, which means a lower pH. So to me, acidity is a pretty big one for aging.
Anyone else?
I mean, if you look at like in Moselle, like they pick, if you pick a bottle up, you'll see the alcohol is like 10%. And then as he said, the acidity is also low. So they're way ageable and everything. But for my side point, it's all three. It's really important because you have to have good alcohol, good acid and tannins, because I think that makes it more ageability. If your tannins are so high, I think there's a little imbalance in the wine. So if you have a good balance of it, it's just, I think your wine becomes a good ageability wine that you can drink over years and years.
Yeah, I think a good example of that would be 06, which was a really hot, ripe vintage, but the fruit was weird. It was one of these vintages where it came in fairly high alcohol and a little soft, and people thought the wines were going to just be quick drinkers and go away. But the fruit was so physiologically ripe when it came in. There was this fantastic balance between the tannins and the alcohol and the softer acid. Those wines are amazing now. We still got a few cases of those, and we open them every few months. Man, they're awesome. They've held together amazingly. Now, again, if you waited 2 more weeks and it was crazy ripe, it probably wouldn't have worked. But it's knowing your sites and knowing the blocks and knowing which blocks you can kind of push a little bit longer. And which, you especially after you've worked with them for a few years, which blocks can kind of suck it up and hang out there and still produce some pretty ageable wines, and others that you need to pick on that earlier side, which is great for us because none of us can process it all in one day.
Stewart, and on a cooler vintage, do you look at, cold soaking a little bit longer to get that tannin? What do you do?
It depends a little bit on physiological ripeness. So if you look at 2010 and 2011, those were both super cold vintages, right? They're like the latest vintages we've ever had. We treated the grapes differently. We actually cold soaked longer in 10 because by the time we finally picked in 10, the seeds were nice, brown and crunchy and ripe, and they wouldn't just soak out all this, a little bit harsher, shorter chain tannins into the wines. 11, the seeds weren't quite as ripe, so we actually did a little bit shorter cold soak, and the wines just turned out differently. The 10s have a little bit more depth and broadness to them now. The 11s just have this bright laser point focus on the acidity, and they're both delicious. They're just different delicious. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why we're all making wine in Oregon, because we actually have vintage differences. The wines are different. A 19 is not a 16. A 10 is not a 03. That's the fun of it. Otherwise, you're just picking blueberries and sticking them on a shelf.
The celebration of vintage variability, right?
Yeah.
Nate, you want to add to anything?
I was just gonna, that trifecta is very important. Kind of the sturdiness of all that. But one thing that I think is really important that we've always gone back and looked through our library, finding wines that have fresh fruit flavor when they're young, and allowing them to those fruit flavors to develop into more complex aged aromatics. So if you have that fresh fruit to guide it along the ageability process, I think that's really important.
Great. John?
I get to go last this time.
Yeah.
The original question, if you forced me, I would pick acid. If you said I had to pick one that I would consider most important to ageability, and I say that because just from a picking decision, if my acids start dropping, I pick. I don't care where the sugars are. I'm picking because I just feel like I'm heading down a bad road when my acids start dropping in the vineyard. So push comes to shove, I would go with acid as being the most important ageability. But as Nate and everybody talks about, if you don't have all three, the wine's not going to age well anyway, no matter how high your acids are.
Right. That's when you start to taste those wines that are a little disjointed and the colors dropped out and there's rim variation and high acid, no fruit, and vice versa, or it could be hot with too much alcohol. It's that fine line and that fine balance, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. I want to throw another curveball at all of you. What is the most memorable winemaking advice you've ever received? And it could be in the vineyard or winemaking, but I'm kind of focused on the winemaking side of it. Look at that, puts you all in your seat and like thinking and scratching your heads, right?
Don't screw it up. I mean, if you got good grapes, don't screw it up. I mean, it's really hard to make great wine out of bad grapes. So to me, it's a funny joke that we say, but truly spend the time in the vineyard and really be gentle in the winery. And if you got great equipment, great vineyard, all you can really do is screw it up in the winery by trying to do too much usually. So.
And don't panic. I think don't panic, especially in the cooler vintages, is the best advice. So it rained. Okay, you leaf pulled 2 weeks ago, so you've got good air circulation. It's fine. It's not a problem. Don't freak out.
Yeah, to your point, you hear that all the time when it starts raining and it's harvest. Everyone starts calling each other. What are you doing? What should I do? Should I wait? Is it going to stop raining? Do I pick now? What's going on, right?
Yeah.
So you're just patient and you take your time.
And trust your gut.
Yeah, like if you look at 2000, I think, and Tahmiene, you must have seen this in 2010 as well. 2010, it was like later by a month than anything we picked in 10 years. And I kept getting phone calls and kept getting phone calls. When are you going to pick? When are you going to pick? I'm like, it's not ripe. There's no flavor. I'm not picking it yet. And yeah, it's just a matter of please don't panic. It'll all be fine. You're all great farmers. The vineyard looks awesome. Just wait.
Yeah, no, I would say, yeah, remembering 10 and 11, you're just turning around, like, it was unusual for us because we were like sitting there like, I would be done, by this. And then it was like around, like, I think it was like in 11, the last fruit came in like a day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I was just like, am I going to be still in the winery during December? Like, I was just like, this is so weird for me.
Yeah, patience. Some people say beer. They need a lot of beer to make good wine, right?
Beer helps with the patience.
It does. Yeah. Right. Well, anyone else want to comment on memorable winemaking advice besides patience?
Well, I guess I have a little bit of a counter to that. In the really bad, like the really rainy years, like a 13 or a 7, when it was like lights out. The best lights out rain, the best advice kind of for me has been opposite, like go get as much as you can, because especially for a site in the Dundee Hills, it does not handle up to the monsoon type of conditions like a 13. So and we always picked before and after just to see, but I think those real season closing rains that are coming.
All hands on deck, pick as fast as you can, right?
Just get it.
Yeah, I would agree to that for sure. Well, great. Julie, is there any comments or questions?
I have a question. We've got all winemakers here, which is always fun. And my question is, okay, so let's imagine you're getting ready for harvest. You're meeting your harvest interns for the season on their first day, and you've got an extra one in the group, and it's you from your first harvest, however many years ago. So my question is, number one, what advice do you give them? And number two, what job do you give them on their first day? It's you from your first harvest.
I would give them a squeegee.
Yeah.
And see how attention to detail they are with the squeegee. This has a lot of this person's future projection in the in the industry.
Yep, send them outside to go clean fermenter.
Well,
That's what you would do to yourself. Here's a
Oh, yeah,
squeegee, go
absolutely.
clean.
actually, Stu, Stuart, I disagree with that. What I find is what I don't want a new person is to have a pressure washer in their hand.
Oh, I didn't say
That-
pressure washer.
Oh, okay.
Russian bucket, man.
But you know, once
They're not that advanced. It's the
a new
squeegee.
intern gets a pressure washer, it's almost hypnotic. You can't get it out of their hands. It's like, no, you don't get to do any pressure washing your first few days. You can sort. That's what we're going to teach you to sort.
That's funny.
It may or may not have been me, but I would definitely say don't show up in tennis. Like tennis shoes,
Oh,
you're gonna have a bad day in an hour or two. And
no
there is-
flip flops there.
no, there is a correct way to wash a floor, and I'm going to teach you that on day one because it's really painful to watch you wash a floor for 4 hours and it can take 10 minutes. Julia knows that. She worked for me a few years ago, but
Brian,
don't wear tennis shoes. You'll get destroyed.
every time I squeegee my shower, I think of Harvest and Alexana. I am like very much more particular about cleaning the floor of my shower these days.
Life skills. Life skills.
Yes.
Say I had an intern wear look like nice dress shoes, and I was like, I
Wow.
have boots, and he's like, no, I'm very comfortable. And it's like, we're gonna be on your feet all day, you know. And he literally like came for like maybe 2 weeks with his like nice dress shoes, and I'm like, you're going
Wow,
to
that's
destroy it.
Wow.
impressive.
Finally, he caved in and went and got in the boots, and I'm like, wow, there we go.
How do those shoes look with percarb all over them?
He did dress nice every day, and I was like, you know, you can wear really bad stuff. It's okay. Like,
Right. That's funny.
I've got another question if you don't mind, John.
Sure.
If that's okay, I want to get it a little bit nerdy. So, you know, for anyone on this call who might not be as familiar, why is it that we talk about clones so much with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay? We talk about clones sometimes with other varieties too, but why are they so important with Pinot Noir specifically?
I think like we like to know, you know, the structure of the wine, the aromatics, the ageability of the wines. On actually one of our blocks in our estate, we actually have a mix of clones, and we call it Pinot Patch because we don't know what the clones are. And it's actually my favorite block on the estate because it's so diverse and unique versus the other blocks. I'm like, oh, I know with the 667 on my property, I'm going to get a little bit of tobacco, and then 115, I'm going to get a little bit more of, you know, a nice, you know, rose petal aromatics. But this block every year to year, it's like so different that it just like makes me like love it more. And then I fight with my father not to sell this fruit to anyone because I really love the fruit. But I think we as people, we like to know put things and saying, okay, this is how it's going to look, and know what it does.
It gives us the illusion of control.
Yes. I didn't want to say it. I really didn't want to say control, but I was like, I really like the control.
The thing to me that really intrigues me about Pinot Noir is the clonal diversity. And obviously I do feel site is probably a bit more influential than maybe the clone, but that could be argued. But to me, you know, I've worked with a lot of varietals around the world, and you know, and it's, to me, Pinot Noir clones are almost like their own different varietals when you look at it. And like, you know, T was saying, some bring leather, some bring more fruit, some bring more acid, and in smaller amounts, like Cab versus Bordeaux is pretty distinctly different for sure. But to me, Pinot Noir clones are so different in their picking time, with 777 maybe being early, and then, you know, Wadensville and some other clones, really depending on where they're planted, of course, but can be later clones. To me, they all have their beautifully intrinsic qualities, and field blends can be really nice because of that. Some are different ripeness levels and different, you know, phenolic levels based on the time of picking, but being able to pick these different clones. And then you add rootstock in there. We could talk about this for hours, of course, but to me, each little clone is so different and adds to some blends, which I love blending Pinot Noir clones.
Yeah, I've given less attention to it over the years. The longer I do it, the more start to convince yourself, like, for example, for like Spirit Hill Vineyard, I used to think, oh, 777 it never showed well. And then all of a sudden, a couple years later, we've got a different 777 parcel planted on different soils, and it's amazing, completely different than this same 777, just, a few yards down the way. So I think, yeah, just really been seeing the difference, especially at Spirit Hill with those. We've got pretty dramatic soil differences. So I think I'm kind of moving more into that camp and just embracing what it gives you. But I do like that patchwork diversity and colors and flavors to play with.
Yeah, I think Nate, kind of on top of that, I mean, you do maintain that patchwork piece, but I think the one thing too is when the vineyards are really young, you see these huge stark differences even in the same soils between the clones. As the vines age, it matters. The clones still matter, but they matter a little less.
Right.
You start to see more of the thumbprint of the soils and the subsoils, and you get the patchwork variation still, but it's less variation from block to block. You'll see it a little bit more maybe in the acid structure or the tannin structure, depending on where it's at, but it'll become less important as you go through time.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. We're winding down now. I can't believe it's been an hour, but I have one more quick question before we wrap this up. For anyone on this call, what do you wish more consumers knew about the Willamette Valley?
I really want to say going once, going twice. Still to you.
Nobody wants to say it because it's a secret and it's undiscovered. And so, but to me, we're still, the pioneers really set us up for success. We're 50 something years in, 55, I want to say, commercial wine production. And it's been really fun to watch. And there's this amazing resurgence on different hills that were planted in the 60s and 70s.
John, I would add, just for the folks on this call who obviously know us for Pinot Noir, I think we would benefit
Out here in Dundee and Olive Valley.
For people to know that we can grow other grapes here other than Pinot Noir and do it well. And we're just figuring that out, I think, in the Willamette Valley. So, going forward 20 years from now, and notwithstanding climate and everything else, I hope we're known for something more than Pinot Noir and maybe Chardonnay going forward.
Yeah, great. Sorry there, Brian. We lost the signal on you a little bit. John.
The wrong room, clearly. But I was just saying the diversity is so huge from north to south. It's 100+ miles north to south and fairly wide. And there's some beautiful regions all throughout the Willamette Valley, and come discover them for yourself.
Yeah, I would echo that. We've seen more and more people visit the Willamette Valley, and it's, there's a lot of amazing wineries and vineyards to visit. It's really diverse. So I really hope to see all of you out here, hopefully this summer and the years to come. I wanted to thank all of our participants. For those joining us, this has been fantastic. Thank you guys so much. Thanks again to Julia Burke and the Willamette Valley Wineries Association. We'll see you in person or virtually on August 5th for the Willamette Valley Barrel Auction. And to all of you, thank you for joining us for Preview Week. This has been fantastic. We've really enjoyed having you all. Thank you so much. And by the way, there are other virtual tastings happening throughout the day today, so please log into those. Julia, did you want to wrap this up for us?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, John, also. Thank you for being such an awesome moderator. John is moderating 2 more sessions today. And folks, I have the Preview Week full schedule in the chat if you want to join us. We're having great conversations like this all week. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you for your wines. Thank you for all the amazing thoughts and wisdom that you shared with us today. And cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.